Hi, this is Sue for Parkies and Me, My Journey with Parkinson's. Today I'm talking to Louise Taylor about enduring power of attorney and we're looking at the property aspect. So welcome, Louise.
So how are you?
Good, thank you.
I thought it might be useful for us to have a look at. We've looked at powers of attorney in relation to property,
Hmm.
um, and I thought it might be useful to look at what happens property wise if you don't have an enduring power of attorney in place.
Oh, that's a good
So
idea.
yeah, look, it sometimes is because there's still a huge proportion of the population who don't know enduring powers of attorney exist
Hmm.
or what they're for or anything like that. And then there's people who, younger people, who it just did not come to the top of their list before they needed, unfortunately.
Mm.
People who've suffered a traumatic brain injury or something like that, and then there comes the problem of what to do with their property. There isn't an enduring power of attorney, so they haven't made their own choice
Mm.
as to who's to look after their property. So the issue comes, and it's often the hospital social workers who are the first online to deal with it because you've got this person in a spinal unit or somewhere in the hospital system who has got a tenancy that they need to take care
Mm.
of,
Mm.
and they've got a motorbike that's sitting somewhere in a car that was damaged in the accident, and all that kind of practical stuff that needs to
Mm.
happen, and yet nobody's got the legal right to do it because the person who has got the legal right has lost capacity, so they no longer have it. And nobody has been appointed by an enduring power of attorney.
And the and
So,
the difficult thing too, Louise, is I've been in that situation, as you know,
yeah,
and I
yes,
would have like the 20-year-old ended up in hospital. I know I've got adult children and I don't know their
yeah,
financial situation or whether they're paying
yes,
off a lounge suite or a motorbike or whatever. And they come to me
completely.
and they'll say, the landlord's wanting their money. And
Yes,
out of the woodworkers comes somebody saying they owe car payments to this car dealership and all those sorts of things
absolutely
that
right.
they have no idea what's there. And then if they find it,
No,
they have no way of actually doing anything with it.
that's exactly right. Because, once your children become adults, you try and back away. It doesn't always exist. It doesn't always sort of succeed, but you try and back away and let them have a go at life themselves. Um, and so you don't sort of want to know too much. The less you
No,
know, the better, quite often.
absolutely.
So you're thinking, okay, you've got a new car. I really hope you can pay for that. And then you don't know possibly where they bank.
Mm.
In Privacy Act, no bank is going to tell you. You don't know where they bank. You don't know how much they earn. You might have a ballpark figure. You don't know, are they also receiving accommodation supplement or WINS top ups in some way? Is their child support being paid out of something to someone?
Mm.
There's a whole, running your own financial life, there's a whole lot going on, and some people's financial lives are more chaotic than others. There's a raft of debt repayment arrangements in place.
Mm.
Everybody's screaming for money. Your mum and dad, and your primary concern is your child is desperately ill. But you've got, people screaming at you about money as well.
The
So
thing
really,
that's
really difficult.
It is really, really difficult. And the thing that I found, in the days gone by when I first started work, you got a pay packet, you got a pay
Yes,
slip, you got
yes,
a, a statement from your bank. Everything's done
yeah,
online now, so you can't access
yeah.
their online presence, so you can't sort of see that
No,
there's payments going out
no.
and what they're for.
When I first started work, you got paid in cash. You got a little wrap brown envelope every week. It was great. I've never been richer than when I got that little brown envelope. But no, that's exactly right. So you've got, let's say, mum and dad there thinking, well, look, I've got to step in and find out, well, for a start, find out what's going on, and then try and run his or her financial life for a short time or a long time. So there's a couple of options there. Oh, there's three options actually. The first one is to approach organisations like WINS.
Mm.
ACC is the other one that you probably might have to deal with, depending on how it all went down. They will sometimes have an authority to act system
Yeah.
where you simply may be able to do it by way of a form. And if that's all you need, you might get by without the court system. That's fine. However, if things are more complicated than that, you will need a court order that will allow you access to that person's accounts and allow you to operate their financial life on their behalf. So there's two ways to do it. There is no court fees for any of these. So if you choose to do it yourself, there will be no costs whatsoever. The forms are not the best. They're not difficult. They're just incredibly repetitive. You find yourself writing your own name and the person's name a million times over. And lots of people used to come to me and say, look, I tried to fill out the forms myself, but I completely mucked it up. I just kept writing my own name. I said, no, you've done perfectly.
I
That is the
think
form.
I think lawyers and social workers have this in common, that we spend our life with forms after forms after
Yes, we do.
forms.
Completely do. And so there's two ways you can go with this. And it's going to depend on the financial position of the person, which way you go. The easier path is to get an order to administer property. It's easier because there's no review processes.
Okay.
And I guess from the person's perspective, it means that there's no automatic oversight either. But you can only get an order to administer property if the person's assets are valued at less than 25,000.
Okay.
And their annual income is less than 38,000. So they're both set at quite modest levels. I would say, for example, if most people working full-time will be earning more than that. So to get an order to administer, you need to have 25,000. And the way that you value that is not what did it cost you to buy those items, but if you had to sell them on Trade Me today, not in a fire sale arrangement, but put them on Trade Me and you'd really want them gone within the next, say, 6 weeks, what would you get for them? That's the price. So particularly cars, young people, or all people actually, have a tendency to do up their car and think it's worth an awful lot. Sometimes it just gets more and more devalued every time. But if you had to sell that car on Trade Me realistically, and your other assets, how much would you get? So things like furniture are notoriously low, clothing, personal care items, you're going to get very little for them. So you're really looking at cars, KiwiSaver, savings.
Yeah.
KiwiSaver and savings don't tend to depreciate, so they are good solid items. Cars will depreciate, but still there's often a bit there. And remember, you have to take the debt off that. So it's the amount that's clear of debt. So sometimes a car might not actually be worth what it looks like it's worth. Obviously, property is going to do a good job for you. So you're looking at assets no higher than 25,000, income no higher than 38. Then you can go through the administration of property angle.
So Louise, when I was working with people, it seemed to be the sort of approximate yardstick that I used to use if they were renting and they were on a benefit. It was more likely that they would be in the property administration.
Yeah,
part of
totally
things.
agree with you. Totally agree with you. If a benefit is their sole or primary source of income, on the whole, that's where you're going to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to have to go property manager. There is a situation though where, because as we were saying before, often you've got this person in a hospital bed, apart from ballpark, relatively little about their financial position. You don't actually know what their assets are worth. You don't actually know, to that degree of specificity what their income is. So if that's the case and you think you are anywhere near the borderline, I say go for property manager.
Yeah.
To be sure, because otherwise you're going to have to do it twice.
And I think you can make
And
assumptions when people are younger. I mean, I met a woman in my social work journey who was her parents died quite young, and she had an inheritance, and the man that she
mhm,
married had the same situation. So they both had sort of sizable inheritances.
right,
So for their age, they had quite a lot in the
yes.
pot if anything had to be sort of looked after.
Yeah, it's the thing with assumptions, isn't it? The other thing with ACC um, is lump sum payments.
Oh,
If,
true.
if a person is in the situation that they're in due to an accident, there is a chance that there's a very significant payment on its way,
Mm.
in which case you're going to have to drop your administration and go for property manager anyway.
Oh, true.
The other thing that I think's bumped it up really significantly is KiwiSaver. A lot of people have a bit stacked away there. Maybe they've got 8 or 9 thousand stacked away
Mm.
there, but you add to that um, the car and the laptop and the phone and a few other things. You're perhaps getting up there towards the 25K.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, if in doubt, go for property management. Property management. The the role is essentially the same. It's just that property management, because you are dealing with more significant amounts of money, has got checks and balances built in.
Mm.
So you, within the first 3 months, you're going to have to report to the court on the person's financial position so that the court knows what was the position when you took over.
Mm. So a line in the sand.
And line in, yep, exactly, line in the sand. Where do things look? What what can we judge against? Every single year after that, you also need to file documents with the court to
Hmm.
say this is what it looks like now. So there is a proactive review every year. It technically lasts 3 years, although the court can make it actually any time they like, and sometimes they go with 5. Um, but technically it's 3. And then there will be a review process, which will be pretty technical only.
Mm.
If there's been no concerns raised by anybody else, and the documents that have been filed look pretty logical, it might be that they are going down, but they're going down at a moderate, understandable rate.
Hmm.
Um, then they're probably just going to review it again. They will ask the lawyer who's been appointed by the court to have a look into it and just double check to have a look, um, and just do a pretty technical review of things. So look, the powers are the same. It's just that because the amount of money is higher for property management, there's a proactive requirement for you to report to the court. So you have to report at the start each year, and then when you leave the position or when the person passes away. Again, so that the court knows what happened at the start, what happened every year through, and what happened at the end.
Actually, Louise, you
Um,
just raised something that
yeah.
is quite useful to talk about. Lawyer for the
Mhm.
subject person. What's their role?
Yes,
When does it start? When does it stop?
sure. Okay. So when the court receives an application for welfare guardianship or for property management, they look at the documents, and the documents say this person says that they're suitable for the role. But the court says, well, we want an independent view on that. We've got a medical view, which says somebody needs to do this role. We've got a person who's stepped up and says, I'm the right person to do this role. The court says, well, we just want another set of eyes on this.
Mm.
So they appoint a lawyer for subject person who's an independent lawyer who casts an eye over things. So they will go and visit the subject person, and then they will go and visit the proposed um, manager or welfare guardian and have a look over things just to check that sometimes it's the case that the subject person, when that name is mentioned, they can look fearful.
Mm.
Um, they are looking for cues like that. I had a client who was welfare guardian for her daughter. And her daughter had a condition where she superficially appeared very well, not very quite capable. You could have a chat with her on about the weather, and what she had been doing, and she could chat with you, and you would think, okay, she's low competence, but there's competence there.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, once you asked her some more questions behind that, why why are you saying this, all that kind of stuff,
Mm.
then you found out how absolutely vulnerable she was. And she was actually intercepted at the border, leaving for Pakistan, where she, in her mind, thought she was going to get married and that Maroon 5 were going to play at her wedding. So she had quite fantastical beliefs.
Mm.
And she was captured. Her online behavior had put her in this position. Somebody had scammed her. She was going to Pakistan. And I would say my concern would be sex trafficking. We put a border alert, got her at the border, thank goodness, because it's quite hard once somebody's in Pakistan.
Mm.
So she was competent enough to be a danger to herself. So the lawyer for subject person should get through those superficiality and ask some more searching questions and
Mm.
just form their own view about the medical opinion. It is the case that the court has received false medical opinions that
Okay.
have been falsified, or that the wrong person has been taken to the doctor, all sorts of things like that. So, look, it is a lawyer, not a doctor, who's doing
Mm.
it.
Mm.
So, you are getting a lawyer's view, which useful in some respects and not in others. But it is a check and balance on the system to say, I've spoken to this person, I've spoken to this person. This is my view on the suitability of this person to perform this role. Um, and often it's perfectly fine. You get somebody who's, say, 18, mum and dad, who've been looking after the person with um, a chromosomal condition or a birth condition for
Mm.
18 years, simply want the power to continue doing that.
Mm.
They have nothing but the best interests of their child at heart. It's a quick process, but certainly are situations where lawyer for child has to do a fair amount of work to discover what the reality actually is for this person. So yeah, lawyer for child will contact
Yep.
subject person and the proposed attorney and have a look at the match, and maybe we'll talk to people in the care facility. If it's one parent, if we've got separated parents, there's one parent who wants to be the welfare guardian. They might have a chat to the other parent to say, how do you feel about this?
Mm-hmm.
They might have a chat to the adult siblings. Or if the person is connected to an organization like Lifelinks or something like that, it might have a chat with that. They might look at assessments and things like that have been done. So yeah, that's the role. So if you would expect them to be involved, and then they send an independent report to the court, and the court then looks at the application together with that independent report from lawyer for subject person.
Okay. So what about other family members? Do they only interview the person that's applying, or do they interview
Um,
other family members?
they certainly have the capacity to interview anybody they like.
Okay.
I guess it's a bit of a red flag situation. If everything looks great, they may leave it there. If there's something that's kind of raised the alert for them, then they should keep looking and dig deeper.
Mm.
If something is being said, it makes you think this is a very fractured family. People may hold different views.
Mm.
Because it is often the case that people do, let's say it's mum who's got dementia. There may be different views. There may be adult children who say she should be cared for at home, and others who say she should be in
Mm.
a specific facility, say. So it may fracture. Both sides believe that they're doing the right thing. It's just that their version of the right thing differs. So
Yeah.
it might be one of those situations which are quite hard because everybody's well motivated. Nobody is trying to rip off mum.
Yeah.
They just don't agree. Um, so yeah, those kinds of things. Or it might be that there is one person has put themselves forward as the property manager, and then there's somebody else who says, no, they're not the right person for the job. I am. So you can have 2 or 3 applications for the same subject person.
Mm.
Um,
So when I was a social worker,
yeah,
I often used to meet with the lawyer for the subject person
uh-huh,
and give them a bit of an overview of the family,
yes,
and maybe the nursing staff as to how that person was in day-to-day sort of needs.
yeah,
And I think that was a
very helpful.
useful way to sort of help get that
Look,
package.
very, very helpful because as a lawyer for the subject person, sometimes you do have to take people on face value, and unless there's evidence to the contrary, but somebody independent who can tell you a bit about the dynamics in the family,
Mm,
invaluable. Who can say for it, one common one that I used to hear a lot is somebody would say, well, look, my brother has got a very flash job and he speaks really well, he's going to come across really well, but
yeah.
actually he's awful, and mum hated him and she would hate to think that he was in charge. Whereas I am not going to come across very well. I not as educated or not as confident or whatever. But I love mum and I'm going to do what's right for her.
Yeah.
That's a really, really common one.
So
And then, or a nurse or a care facility worker who's able to alert lawyer for child and say,
yeah,
this is how things work in that family,
yeah,
is really valuable.
yeah. And like you say, it could be the posh, well-spoken brother that doesn't have any sort of feeling towards the
None at
person
all.
concerned. Hardly
Or,
goes to visit
yeah,
them, but
that's right.
sets
Or
himself up
interest.
as
Yeah,
the right person.
just wants the power of the role,
Yeah.
and or doesn't want someone else to have it. And often with if you don't get a heads up, sometimes you are swayed by things like that. So
Mm,
I think it's great when somebody else is willing to say, well, look, this is what we have observed. Because the lawyer for subject person is going to be there for half an hour.
mm,
If you can get a social worker and this person's been in hospital for 6 weeks, such a lot more. You know who's been to visit mum, who mum seems to be fearful of, who she
mm.
enjoys seeing,
Yeah.
um, those kind of things, which are really important.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, when it sort of gets to a critical stage where somebody's ill in hospital and maybe not going to recover their full capacity and they really need someone. It's interesting to see who steps up and who doesn't that you might have expected to.
It is, isn't it? Families are fascinating like that. And sometimes it's somebody that person wouldn't have expected to step up
Mm,
themselves, I think. Um, but yeah, no, families are endlessly fascinating, but also frustrating, and they
absolutely.
just reinvent themselves in endless um, reincarnations as well. So yeah, the more clues lawyer for subject person has, the better off they are.
Thank you, Louise. I think that's been a really good exercise in sort of talking about the complexities of getting somebody to look after property. From what you
Yeah,
say, I think I would rather my person who was vulnerable had a property manager appointed if they
I
could
think
get
that's
into that sort of
yeah.
ballpark.
I think I would too, because um, then you're not going to have to faff around if it turns out that there's more assets or income there than you had thought. You do it
Mm,
once and get it right. And it's got automatic controls on it, court controls on it. So there's much to be said for that. If you have known the other way and you're trying to get a court to reopen something several years down the track, you think,
mm,
gosh, that would have been really good if they had to file
mm.
yearly financial returns.
It's good to feel
Yeah,
that
that's always wonderful.
as a family there's that oversight so that you as a family don't
Yes,
have to kind of say to the person, can we look at what you've been spending? The court is saying
yes,
we need to look at what you're
and
spending. It's not optional.
absolutely. And I've had people who are proposing themselves to look after somebody else's property also say to me, look, I want everybody to know that I'm accountable. I don't want anybody looking at me a bit sideways. Um, at the annual family barbecue, I want everybody to know that I'm filing everything in court so they can go to court and look at the documents if they want. So there are people who themselves want other people to know that they are accountable. So I'd rather go down that path if that's
Absolutely.
the right one.
And I think there are people who stand out as being totally unsuitable from the get-go. I
Yeah.
remember working with a guy in a D6, like high level dementia
Mhm.
unit, and his his son, who was in prison at the time, rang and asked to talk to his social worker, and said to me, "I want to be appointed to act on Dad's behalf because I want access to his bank accounts." And I'm thinking,
Right.
no,
That's everything you need to know right there, isn't it?
that wasn't
Didn't
going to
even
go anywhere.
try to cover it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at least points for honesty, I suppose. Uh, yeah, no, there are absolutely people who stand out and you think, wait, what were you ever thinking? Um, and there's also ones where once they put the application into court for property manager or something, there's all sorts of challenges to it from from siblings usually,
Mm,
and they're not genuine challenges. It's just more fractures in the family. This is just another way to show how fractured the family is. But the system at least has got the, at any time, even with the property manager, yes, you file annual documents. Um, but also there anybody else can challenge that at any time through the family court, same with
mm,
the order to administer. So there's that sort of challenge option as well. And often when you give that advice to people, they don't actually go through with it and make a challenge. They sort of want to tell you that they've got concerns, but then uh, don't really want to raise them any further than telling you that they've got
mm,
concerns. The other question I think somebody who's got concerns needs to ask themselves is, if not that person, then who?
mm.
Are you willing to step up and do the job, or do you know of somebody else who is willing?
Yeah.
And it helps to provide an option
Actually, another thing
for.
that stood out for me was I've had a scenario where a wife has said she wants to act on behalf of her husband, um, and then she's been given the documents because I used to help with the documents, and she keeps not signing them and getting them ready for court or not getting
Yeah.
the consents from other family members. And that's a sort of sign that she's maybe feeling she
Mm,
should do it or is being pushed into
yes.
agreeing, but is not really comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had it too, where the wife has said, well, I need to do this, has been very keen to sign the documents. But you find out later that that relationship's actually been over for a while, and she
Oh
just
yeah.
appeared um, after the accident or the event. She appeared as wife again, but hasn't been for sort of 15 years in between. It is amazing who pops out of the woodwork.
Well, I think sometimes too, for patients in hospital, sometimes their records may not have been upgraded. And
Yes.
I remember going through a form with a patient that had just come in, and I said, "Is this person your partner?" He goes, "Oh my God, no, that was 5 years ago. My current partner would hit the roof if you rang her." So it pays to check these things.
Yeah, look, and things are not always what they seem.
Right, I think we've covered that pretty well. Thank you,
That's all
Louise,
right.
and
Pleasure. Always a pleasure.
we might contact you again.
You know where I am.
I do. Thank you very much. So this has been Sue for
Pleasure, Sue.
Parkies and me, my journey with Parkinson's. Thank you, Louise, and we'll talk
You are
again.
welcome. Sounds great.
Okay, bye.